The morning sun shone brightly over the busy downtown streets as people hurried to their workplaces. Cars lined up at traffic lights, office workers with coffee cups rushed by, and the tall glass building of National Union Bank gleamed in the center of the district. It was just another ordinary day for most people, but for Marissa Green, it was a day she had been preparing for quietly. Marissa stepped out of a cab and adjusted the strap of her neat brown handbag. She wore a beautiful African print dress, colored with shades of gold, red, and deep blue. The dress was elegant, modest, and perfectly tailored to her frame. She had chosen it intentionally. It reflected her culture, her pride, and her confidence. Though surrounded by people in dull gray and black suits, she walked with calm assurance. Her posture was upright, her steps were steady, and her face showed both warmth and determination. As she approached the tall glass doors of the bank, she could already sense the change in atmosphere. Most of the employees and customers rushing. In and out wore the same kind of clothing, neat corporate suits, shiny shoes, and simple accessories. They blended into one another like copies of the same design. Marissa stood out, and she knew it. But she was not uncomfortable. She believed that respect came not from fabric, but from character. The bank lobby was large and bright, with polished floors that reflected the light above. Rows of chairs lined one side where customers waited, while employees in pressed uniforms moved briskly behind counters. At the far end, in a glass-paneled office, sat Mr. Collins, the branch manager. He was a man in his 50s, with sharp features and a tie always tightened too firmly around his neck. His reputation was well known. Among staff, strict, proud, and sometimes unnecessarily harsh. When Marissa entered, several eyes turned toward her. Some customers glanced quickly at her dress, surprised by the bold colors in a place where dark suits were the unspoken uniform. A young teller gave her a polite smile, but others looked away, uncertain of what to think. From inside his office, Mr. Collins noticed her immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly. To him, the bank was a place of formality, order, and rules. He believed that image meant everything. And in his mind, Marissa's attire did not belong in the world of serious business. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the desk as he watched her walk confidently toward the reception desk. Marissa greeted the receptionist kindly and explained that she wanted to meet with the branch manager. Her voice was gentle but steady, and she spoke with the tone of someone who was used to being clear about her purpose. The receptionist, though polite, looked hesitant. People rarely walked in requesting to see Mr. Collins directly. Most customers asked to meet a teller, a loan officer, or someone in customer service. But the receptionist nodded and went to inform the manager. Before the receptionist even reached him, Mr. Collins had stepped out of his office. He straightened his jacket, walked briskly across the lobby, and stopped in front of Marissa. His eyes swept over her dress from top to bottom, and his lips curved into a thin smile that was more mocking than welcoming. "Well," he said with a chuckle, "this is different. We usually expect a bit more professionalism in attire when visiting a business branch." The words were not loud, but they carried. A couple of customers sitting nearby looked up, and two tellers exchanged awkward glances. Marissa's calm expression didn't change. She simply met his eyes with quiet strength. "I assure you," she replied softly, "I am here for a professional matter." Her tone was respectful, but there was something in her voice that held weight, something that made people want to listen. Still, Mr. Collins only raised his eyebrows. Of course," he said quickly, though his smirk remained. "Why don't you take a seat? Someone will be with you shortly." His words carried a dismissive edge, the kind he often used with people he didn't take seriously. Marissa gave a small nod and walked to the waiting area. She sat gracefully, placed her handbag on her lap, and folded her hands. Her posture was calm, her breathing even. She did not show the slightest sign of being offended or uncomfortable. Instead, she quietly observed the branch around her, the hurried staff, the polite tellers, the cautious customers. Every detail mattered to her. Meanwhile, Mr. Collins returned to his office, muttering under his breath about appropriate appearances and first impressions. He believed he had handled the situation correctly, putting her in her place, without being openly rude. What he didn't know was that every word, every glance, and every decision he made that day was going to matter more than he could imagine. From her seat, Marissa noticed how differently Mr. Collins greeted other customers. When a man in a dark business suit entered moments later, Mr. Collins himself walked forward, shook his hand warmly, and even offered him coffee before leading him into the office. The contrast was clear to anyone paying attention, but Marissa only smiled faintly, as though she had expected nothing less. For her, this was just the beginning. She had come for a reason far greater than opening an account or asking for a loan. She was here to see the truth with her own eyes, and Mr. Collins, without knowing it, had already given her the first piece of proof she needed. The lobby of National Union Bank stayed busy as the morning hours moved forward. Customers came and went, filling out forms, asking questions, or waiting their turn with patient sighs. Marissa remained seated in the waiting area, her hands resting gently on her handbag. She looked calm, but her eyes carefully observed everything happening around her. Mr. Collins, the branch manager, returned to his office but continued to glance at her through the glass walls. The colorful dress she wore seemed to bother him, more than he wanted to admit. To him, image mattered above all else. The bank was a place where he believed only dark suits and stiff collars were a sign of professionalism. Anyone outside that narrow idea, in his view, did not belong in his world of serious business. Inside his office, he muttered quietly to himself, "This is a place of order, not a fashion show." His words were not meant for anyone, but one of his junior staff passing by his door caught them. The staff member frowned slightly, realizing that the comment was about the woman waiting outside. He said nothing, though, as most employees preferred not to challenge Mr. Collins. A few minutes later, a teller approached Marissa to offer her assistance. "Good morning, ma'am," the teller said kindly. "Is there something I can help you with?" Marissa smiled warmly and shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm here specifically to meet the branch manager. I'll wait." The teller gave a polite nod, though her eyes revealed a sense of curiosity. Not many people asked to meet Mr. Collins directly, and when they did, it was usually because of a complaint or a very important request. The teller went back to her desk, whispering softly to a colleague about the unusual visitor. At last, Mr. Collins walked out of his office once more, his expression carefully arranged between politeness and superiority. He stopped in front of Marissa with a practiced smile. "Still here?" he asked, his tone carrying a faint amusement. "I suppose you must really want to see me." Marissa rose from her seat slowly, her posture straight, her voice calm. "Yes, I do. May we speak privately?" He tilted his head, studying her again. "Privately?" he repeated. "Well, I usually reserve my time for scheduled appointments, but I guess we can spare a few minutes." Several staff members nearby heard the way he said, "spare a few minutes." The tone was light, but it dripped with condescension, as though Marissa was an interruption rather than a person deserving respect. Some of the younger employees exchanged uneasy glances, but no one said a word. Collins gestured toward his office with a sweeping hand. "After you," he said, his smile still sharp. As they walked into the office, Collins closed the glass door behind them. He motioned for Marissa to sit in the chair opposite his desk while he sank into his leather chair with an air of authority. He leaned back, resting his hands on the desk, eyes locked on her attire once again. "You know," he began slowly, as though delivering friendly advice, "this is a professional establishment. People usually wear business suits when they want to discuss important matters. It's just how things are done." His voice was light, but the message beneath it was clear. He believed she did not belong. Marissa folded her hands neatly in her lap and listened without interruption. Her calm expression did not change. She let him speak, as if she wanted him to reveal more of his thoughts. Collins leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "I don't mean to offend," he added with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "but if you want people in this environment to take you seriously, presentation matters." Outside the office, through the glass walls, a few employees pretended to work but quietly observed the conversation. They could not hear everything, but they saw the dismissive gestures, the smirk, and the way Collins kept glancing at her dress. It was not the first time they had seen their manager act this way toward someone he believed was less professional. Marissa finally spoke, her voice measured and calm. "I appreciate your concern, but I am very comfortable in what I am wearing. I came here for a matter of importance, and I would like to proceed with it." Her tone carried no anger, no defensiveness, only quiet certainty. For a brief moment, Collins looked unsettled. He had expected her to apologize, to shrink under his words, maybe even to become flustered. But she did none of that. She met his gaze with composure, as if his opinion did not shake her in the slightest. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "let's see what's so important then." He leaned back in his chair, pretending to look busy as he rearranged some papers on his desk. But in truth, he was studying her again, wondering why she had insisted on meeting him directly. Customers rarely had the patience or confidence to demand his time, and certainly not those dressed in his eyes so casually. Marissa opened her handbag slowly and pulled out a slim folder. She placed it on the desk without explanation. Her movements were precise, her manner calm. Collins eyed the folder curiously, but did not open it yet. Instead, he gave another half-smile. "Interesting choice of presentation," he said, tapping the folder with his finger. "I suppose we'll see if the contents are as colorful as the cover." It was another attempt at ridicule, subtle but sharp. Marissa did not respond. She simply waited, her silence stronger than any retort. The seconds ticked by, and though Collins acted as if he was in control, a small unease began to creep into him. There was something about her composure, something about the way she refused to be shaken, that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Outside the glass office, employees continued with their tasks, though a quiet tension lingered in the air. They could sense that something unusual was unfolding. Marissa sat tall, patient, unbothered. For her, this was just the next step. For Collins, it was only the beginning of a test he didn't know he was about to fail. The air inside the glass office felt heavier than it should have been. The quiet hum of printers and soft chatter from the lobby seemed distant. It was just Marissa and Mr. Collins now, sitting across the polished wooden desk. One carried herself, with quiet dignity. The other wore arrogance like a badge of honor. Collins leaned back in his chair, twirling a pen between his fingers. His smile remained, though it was not the kind of smile that welcomed. It was the kind that measured, judged, and looked down. To him, this was just another ordinary interaction with someone he did not believe belonged in his world. Marissa, however, did not bend to the weight of his stare. She sat with her back straight, her handbag resting neatly on her lap, her hands folded calmly. She did not fidget, she did not glance away, and she did not try to explain herself. Her silence was strong, and it unsettled him more than her words ever could. "So," Collins finally said, tapping the desk, "you wanted to meet me. That is unusual. Normally, customers are happy to speak with our team at the front desks. What exactly do you want from the branch manager?" His tone was sharp, though he tried to dress it in politeness. To most people, such words might have felt like a challenge, even a dismissal. But Marissa's expression did not change. I wanted to see you because this matter requires your attention, she replied, her voice steady and even. It cannot be handled at a counter. Something in the way she spoke made him pause. There was no arrogance, no begging, and no nervousness. Her words were simple, but they carried weight, as if she had chosen each one carefully. Collins narrowed his eyes. Is that so? Well, I suppose you should explain. He leaned forward slightly, pen now still in his hand, waiting for her to stumble or hesitate, but she did not. Instead, she calmly opened the slim folder she had placed on his desk. Earlier, she slid a paper to the side so that he could see the bank's official letterhead at the top. You'll understand soon, she said softly. He frowned, curiosity sparking in his eyes. He wanted to reach for the papers immediately, but something in her tone made him hesitate. He felt a strange pull, an awareness that this woman was not as simple as he first thought. Still, his pride was stronger than his caution. He chuckled lightly, trying to brush off the feeling. You seem very confident. I must say confidence is good, though sometimes it is misplaced. Marissa simply looked at him, her gaze steady. Her silence again spoke louder than his words. Outside, the glass office. A few employees passed by, sneaking glances. They could not hear the conversation, but they saw the way their manager leaned forward, the way the woman sat composed and unbothered. It was unusual. Normally, people who entered that office left quickly, often looking frustrated or defeated. This woman, however, sat like she belonged there. Collins finally pushed the folder closer to himself, though he still didn't open it. He wanted to keep control of the conversation. Before I even look at this, let me be very clear, he said, his voice firm. This branch operates with structure. I expect professionalism from everyone who walks in. That means customers, staff, and especially anyone who requests my time. First impressions matter. I advise you to keep that in mind. The words were sharp, yet Marissa's face did not change. Instead, she gave a small nod. I understand. First impressions do matter. That is why I am here, to see the truth for myself. The choice of words caught him off guard. The truth? He repeated, frowning slightly. Yes, she said, her voice calm but unyielding. Sometimes the smallest actions show the biggest truths. He didn't know why, but the words unsettled him. For the first time since she had entered, his smile faltered just a little. He quickly covered it with a laugh. You speak as if you came here with some grand purpose. But let me remind you, this is just a bank. People come here for accounts, loans, or services, nothing more. Her eyes held his without flinching. I came for something more, she said quietly. There was no challenge in her tone, no anger, just certainty. Collins leaned back again, shifting uncomfortably. He wanted to dismiss her, to end the conversation, but something inside stopped him. Her calmness was unusual. Most people reacted to his cutting words. Some grew defensive, some became nervous, and some simply left. But she didn't. Instead, she grew stronger with every passing second. Outside, the staff kept stealing looks. They were not sure why this conversation felt different, but they sensed a quiet tension building. The woman was not ordinary, and their manager, though trying to appear confident, seemed unusually unsettled. Marissa gently closed the folder again and placed her hands on top of it. You will read this soon, she said softly. But before you do, I wanted to meet you. I wanted to see how you speak, how you think, and how you lead. That is what matters most. Her words landed like stones in water, rippling through the silence. Collins stared at her, his pride unwilling to let him admit the discomfort rising inside. He forced another smile, though his voice was tighter now. Well, you've certainly made an impression. I can't say I've met many like you. Marissa returned a gentle smile. Impressions reveal more than we think. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the passing seconds. To everyone outside, it was just another morning. But inside that glass office, something had shifted. Collins, though he refused to show it, felt the ground beneath his pride begin to tremble, and Marissa, calm and steady, had only just begun. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each sound echoing in the quiet of Mr. Collins's office. Outside, customers continued their business as usual, unaware of the quiet storm brewing behind the glass. Inside, the balance of power was slowly shifting, though Collins did not yet realize it. He leaned forward at last and pulled the folder closer to him. His fingers brushed the smooth cover, but he hesitated to open it. Something about the calm way Marissa sat, the steady way she looked at him, made him feel as though the moment was heavier than he wanted it to be. Still, pride pushed him onward. He flipped open the folder, expecting to find a complaint letter, perhaps a request, or some complicated forms. But as his eyes fell on the documents inside, his confident smile began to fade. The first page bore the bold letterhead of National Union Bank Headquarters. His eyes scanned the words quickly. At the top was his own name, Mr. William Collins, branch manager. His throat tightened slightly. He turned the page, reading faster, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Marissa remained silent. She watched him carefully, noting every flicker in his expression. Collins cleared his throat. This looks like an official document," he said, his voice unsure for the first time that morning. "It is," Marissa replied simply. He glanced at her, searching for explanation. "What exactly is this folder supposed to be? Some kind of request?" Her voice remained calm. "It is not a request. It is a report, and it concerns you." The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Collins shifted in his chair, a small crease forming between his brows. He skimmed the next page, his eyes catching phrases that made his stomach twist. Employee treatment, branch culture, customer, complaints, investigation required. He set the papers down quickly, trying to regain his composure. "I don't know what this is supposed to mean," he said with a forced laugh. "Surely this is some misunderstanding. Who exactly are you?" Marissa straightened slightly, her voice firm, yet still gentle. "I am an internal investigator from headquarters. I was sent here to observe this branch. My role is to look closely at the leadership, the behavior, and the culture under your management. Today, I came to meet you in person, and everything that has happened so far has given me what I needed to see." Her words struck like a quiet hammer. For a moment, Collins sat frozen. His mind raced back over the last 30 minutes. The way he had smirked at her dress, the dismissive tone, the subtle mockery. He realized, piece by piece, that all of it had been witnessed by the very person who held authority over his future. He forced a chuckle, though his voice shook. "You can't expect me to believe that headquarters would send someone without notice. I would have been informed." Marissa tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Headquarters does not inform managers when they are under review. That would defeat the purpose." The silence that followed was thick. Collins tapped his pen against the desk, trying to mask his unease, but his hand betrayed him with a slight tremor. He looked down at the folder again, flipping through more pages. Each page contained structured notes, references to previous complaints, and a formal directive signed by the HR director. His chest tightened. This was no trick. This was real. Finally, he looked up, his arrogance cracking. "So, you've been watching me?" "Yes," Marissa said softly. "Not just today. Headquarters has been gathering information for months. I was sent here to confirm what we had already been told." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "And what exactly did you see?" he asked. though his voice was quieter now. Marissa did not raise her tone. She did not need to. I saw how quickly you judged someone based on appearance. I saw how easily you dismissed a person you believed was not dressed to your standard of professionalism, and I saw how differently you treated others who walked in wearing suits. That is not leadership. That is favoritism, and it damages not only the staff, but also the customers. Each sentence struck deeper than the last. Collins leaned back in his chair, trying to appear calm, but his mind was racing. He had built his entire reputation on being strict, on controlling the environment of his branch. He believed that order and respect came from appearance. But now, faced with the reality in front of him, he felt his foundation begin to crumble. Marissa's expression softened slightly, but her words stayed steady. This is not just about a dress. It is about dignity. Respect in the way people are valued. Headquarters expects better from its managers, and today you showed me exactly why I am here. He sat in silence, unable to speak. For the first time in many years, Mr. Collins felt the power slip away from him. The office, once his territory of control, now felt like a cage closing in, and the woman he had dismissed so quickly sat across. From him, calm, confident, and in full command. The tables had turned. Outside, employees noticed the change through the glass. They saw their manager's shoulders stiff, his expression uneasy, while the woman sat upright, composed. They whispered quietly to one another, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Marissa finally rose from her chair, her movements graceful and certain. She placed the folder neatly back on the desk, leaving it open for him to read further. "You will have time to look at the rest," she said. "For now, I have seen what I needed. The report will be completed today." Her words were calm, but they carried finality. Collins tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. All he managed was a weak nod. Marissa gave a small, polite smile, then walked toward the door. The sound of her heels on the polished floor echoed softly, each step a reminder of how much the balance had shifted. She opened the door and stepped out, leaving Collins alone with his thoughts and the heavy folder of truth. For the first time, he felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in years: fear. The office door closed softly behind Marissa, leaving Mr. Collins alone with the folder on his desk. For a long moment, he did not move. His hands rested on the desk, but his fingers twitched restlessly. The morning, which had begun with confidence and pride, now felt heavy with dread. He leaned forward, flipping through the pages of the folder again. Each sheet confirmed what Marissa had said. There were official headers, notes from headquarters, and even signatures from senior leaders. The words blurred as his eyes raced across them: employee mistreatment, pattern of complaints, leadership review, and most alarming of all, final recommendation. His chest tightened. This was no ordinary customer. She had not come for a loan, an account, or a simple request. She had come for him. Out in the lobby, Marissa sat calmly once more, as if nothing had happened. She crossed her legs neatly, her handbag resting against her side, her expression peaceful. The staff, curious but cautious, kept glancing at her. They whispered quietly, wondering who she was and why she seemed so composed after speaking with their intimidating manager. Inside the office, Collins finally pushed his chair back. He stood, pacing the room with the folder still in his hands. His reflection stared back at him from the glass walls, a proud man suddenly shaken, a manager who no longer looked in control. He ran a hand over his face and muttered under his breath, "No, this can't be happening." But it was. A few minutes later, he stepped out of his office. His tie felt tighter than usual, and though he tried to keep his face calm, his eyes betrayed his unease. He walked toward Marissa, who stood politely as he approached. "Would you Step back inside for a moment? He asked, his voice quieter than before. She gave a gentle nod and followed him into the office once more. The staff noticed the shift immediately. The arrogance that usually marked his stride was gone, replaced with hesitation. Back in the office, Collins closed the door behind them. He turned toward her, folder still in his hands. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at her, as if searching for a way to regain control. But the balance had already shifted. Finally, he spoke. So it's true, then. You're with headquarters. Marissa inclined her head slightly. Yes. I was assigned to this branch after multiple concerns were raised about leadership. My role is to evaluate, observe, and confirm what has been reported. Her tone was calm, but her words carried undeniable authority. Collins sank into his chair, the folder now heavy in his lap. Concerns, he repeated, his voice almost a whisper. Yes, she said, her eyes steady on him. Complaints from both staff and customers. Patterns that show favoritism, harsh treatment, and judgment based on appearances. Headquarters take such matters seriously. His face tightened. For years, he had run the branch with strict rules, believing that control, an image made the bank stronger. He dismissed complaints as overreactions, never imagining they would reach headquarters. But now, the evidence was in his hands, and the investigator sat across from him. He began, but stopped. His usual confident tone was gone. He struggled to find words. I didn't realize... Marissa leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle but firm. Respect is not shown through clothing. It is shown through character, through the way people are treated. Today, in just a few moments, you revealed exactly why I am here. Her words were not angry, not loud, but they pierced deeper than any shout. Collins lowered his eyes, staring at the papers again. Each page felt like a mirror reflecting his behavior, his choices, his attitude. He remembered the way he had smirked at her dress, the mocking tone he used, the way he dismissed her without even knowing who she was. And now, that moment stood as evidence against him. For the first time, he felt exposed. Marissa allowed the silence to stretch. She knew the weight of truth needed no decoration. Finally, she continued, her tone steady. This is not just about one comment. It is about a pattern. A manager sets the culture of a branch. When respect is missing at the top, it disappears everywhere else. Employees feel it. Customers feel it. That is why this branch has been under review. Her words painted a picture he could no longer deny. Collins exhaled slowly, his pride slipping further with each passing second. He thought about the staff outside, the ones who always nodded quickly, the ones who avoided his sharp remarks. Had they seen him as a leader, or had they endured him out of fear? The realization pressed on him like a weight he could not lift. Marissa reached into her folder once more and pulled out a single envelope. She placed it gently on the desk between them. This, she said softly, is the decision from headquarters. His breath caught. His hands hesitated before reaching for the envelope. Slowly, he tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. His eyes scanned the page, each word striking him harder than the last. Termination, effective immediately, signed by the HR director and approved by the executive board. His heart sank. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. This was final. His years of authority, his pride, his belief in control, all of it ended in a few sentences written on that page. Marissa spoke gently, but her words carried no softness. You have the right to appeal formally, but the decision has been made. Headquarters believes this branch deserves leadership built on respect, not arrogance. Collins lowered the letter slowly, his shoulders heavy. For once, he had nothing to say. No sharp words, no clever retorts, No mocking smile. Only silence. Marissa rose gracefully from her chair. She placed the rest of the folder neatly on the desk. Her eyes met his one last time. This is not the end of your story, Mr. Collins, but it is the end of your time here. What you choose to do next will define you more than the suit you wear. Her voice held no anger, only quiet truth. She turned and walked toward the door. As she opened it, the light from the lobby spilled into the office. Employees looked up, curiously, sensing the change. Marissa stepped out with calm dignity, leaving Collins alone with the letter that had stripped away the pride he once wore so easily. For him, the reveal had come like a storm, sudden, undeniable, and final. The sound of the office door closing behind Marissa echoed in Mr. Collins's ears like a final judgment. The letter of termination lay open on his desk, its bold words staring back at him. Effective immediately. For a long time, he simply sat there, frozen, unable to believe that everything he had built at the branch had ended so suddenly. His office, once a place of power, now felt like a prison. The glass walls that he once liked for their transparency now seemed cruel. For every staff member outside could see his stiff posture, his pale face, and his trembling hands. He was no longer the untouchable manager. He was a man stripped of authority. Collins pressed his palms flat against the desk and leaned forward, breathing slowly. He had prided himself on control, on respect, on being the one everyone had to answer to. Yet now, one calm woman had turned all of that upside down in less than an hour. The weight of humiliation pressed heavily on his chest. Outside in the lobby, Marissa's quiet composure stood in sharp contrast to his collapse. She moved with ease, thanking a teller who offered her a glass of water. Her smile was gentle, her tone kind, but her presence carried an undeniable strength. Staff whispered softly, curious about who she truly was. Inside the office, Collins read the letter again, as if hoping the words might change. They didn't. The language was clear, professional, and final. His name was printed at the top, and the signatures at the bottom sealed his fate. He dropped the paper onto the desk, his hands covering his face. The emotional blow hit him harder than any anger could have. He thought back over his years at the branch. He remembered the times he had scolded employees harshly for small mistakes, the moments he had ignored suggestions because they came from someone he didn't respect, the way he looked down on customers who didn't fit his picture of professional. At the time, he had convinced himself it was discipline, that he was upholding standards. But now, sitting in silence, he saw it for what it was: pride. He had mistaken arrogance for leadership. A soft knock at the office door broke his thoughts. Collins quickly wiped his face and straightened, trying to compose himself. "Yes?" he called, his voice rough. The receptionist peeked inside nervously. "Sir, do you need anything?" Her eyes flicked to the letter still lying on his desk, the bold header visible even from where she stood. For a moment she hesitated, then added softly, We all noticed something seemed wrong." Collins swallowed, forcing a nod. "No. I'll manage." She gave a small nod and closed the door gently. The truth was, he wasn't managing. The walls of pride he had built around himself were crumbling fast. The words of Marissa echoed in his mind. Respect is not shown through clothing. It is shown through character. Those words stung because deep down he knew they were true. He had spent years judging people by appearances, rewarding those who looked the part while dismissing those who didn't. But appearances could not hide weakness in character, and now his own character had been exposed. Meanwhile, Marissa remained, seated calmly in the lobby. She spoke kindly with a young teller who shyly asked her if everything was all right. Her gentle response reassured the teller, who found herself strangely inspired by the woman's composure. Though no one in the branch knew the full story yet, They all felt something powerful was happening. Inside his office, Collins paced the floor. His mind was a storm of regret, anger, and disbelief. Regret for the years he had treated people poorly, anger at himself for not seeing this coming, and disbelief that the end of his career had arrived in such a quiet, decisive way. He sat back down and stared at the letter once more. The signatures at the bottom seemed to press into his chest like a weight. His career was over, but worse than that, his pride had been shattered. For years he had walked tall, certain of his authority. Now, the silence of the office reminded him that he had no authority left. The emotional blow wasn't only the loss of his job. It was the realization of what he had become. A man who measured worth by fabric, who mocked what he didn't understand, who used his position to elevate himself instead of those around him. That truth cut deeper than the termination letter. Through the glass, he could see Marissa still seated outside, calm as ever. Her presence reminded him that dignity had power far greater than arrogance. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't argued. She hadn't shown anger. And yet, she had undone him completely. His thoughts spiraled. What would his family say? What would the community think? How would he walk out of the branch today, knowing every pair of eyes would be on him? The humiliation alone felt unbearable. But beneath the shame, another feeling stirred, something he hadn't felt in years: humility. For the first time, he saw himself not as a manager with power, but as a man who had failed to lead with respect. The clock ticked on, each second heavier than the last. At last, Collins leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The fight was gone from him. He could no longer deny the truth. The emotional blow had struck its mark, leaving him not angry, but broken. Outside, Marissa stood. She adjusted her handbag and walked toward the office door once more. Staff members watched, in silence, their eyes following her every step. She opened the door gently and looked at Collins. He lifted his eyes to meet hers, and for the first time since their meeting began, there was no pride in his gaze. Only the quiet, painful acknowledgement of defeat. Marissa spoke softly. "The hardest lessons are the ones that stay with us. Remember this one well." Her words were kind, but firm. Collins gave a small nod, unable to reply. The blow had been delivered, not with anger, but with truth, and truth had a weight heavier than any punishment. The branch lobby was unusually quiet for mid-morning. Though customers continued to fill forms and staff handled transactions, an air of tension lingered. Everyone had noticed the change. Their manager, Mr. Collins, who usually walked with stiff authority, had not left his office since Marissa entered. And now, as she stepped out for the final time, all eyes subtly followed her. Marissa walked with calm grace, her colorful dress flowing gently with each step. She carried no papers, no signs of stress. Instead, she held herself with the same quiet dignity she had shown since the moment she walked in. To an ordinary eye, she might have looked like any visitor, but to those who had watched closely, she was something more, a reminder that true strength did not need to shout. Behind the glass, Mr. Collins still sat at his desk, staring at the termination letter. His posture, once upright and commanding, was slouched. His expression, once proud and sharp, now carried the weight of humility. He was no longer the man who mocked, but the man who had been humbled. A young teller, barely in her first year at the branch, leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "Who is she?" Her colleague shrugged softly. "I don't know, but I think she's the reason everything changed today." Marissa reached the reception desk and paused. She turned to the receptionist, the same woman who had hesitated earlier when she first asked for a meeting. "Thank you for your patience today," Marissa said kindly. The receptionist blinked, surprised at her warmth. "Of course, ma'am, I hope everything was all right. Marissa smiled gently. Everything was as it needed to be. With that, she moved toward the exit. The automatic glass doors slid open, letting in a wave of warm air from the busy street outside. She stepped into the sunlight, her head held high, her steps steady. Inside, silence followed her departure. It was not the silence of fear, but of realization. For the staff who had watched, something had shifted. They had seen arrogance collapse and dignity rise. And though Marissa was gone, the lesson she left behind remained. Back in his office, Collins finally stood. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie, though he knew it no longer mattered. The letter sat where Marissa had left it, its words final and unchangeable. For years, he had believed respect came from power, from rules, from appearances. Now, with everything gone, he realized respect had never been his. The knock on his door was soft but certain. It was the head of customer services, a woman who had worked under him for nearly a decade. "Sir," she said quietly, "security has been informed. They'll escort you out when you're ready." The words cut deeper than any blade. Escort him out. The man who once ordered others around now had no authority even to walk out on his own terms. He nodded weakly. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added gently, I hope you find peace, Mr. Collins." When she left, he sat back down for a final moment, staring at his reflection in the glass. The man looking back was not the one who entered the office this morning. This man was humbled, broken, and stripped of pride. And though the shame burned, he knew deep inside that the lesson was one he had long avoided. Meanwhile, outside on the street, Marissa continued her walk. The city moved around her. Cars honked, footsteps rushed, conversations filled the air. Yet for her, everything felt steady. She had not come to celebrate a man's downfall. She had come to uphold dignity, to show that respect mattered more than titles, more than suits, more than power. Her phone buzzed softly. She glanced at the screen, a message from headquarters. Report confirmed. Thank you for handling with professionalism. Marissa slipped the phone back into her handbag. She did not need thanks. The satisfaction lay in the quiet truth. She had done her part. She had stood firm without anger. She had spoken truth without cruelty, and she had let dignity speak louder than pride. Back at the branch, word began to spread. Employees whispered about what had happened. Some felt relief, others curiosity, but all of them felt change. For years they had worked under the shadow of Collins' rigid control. Now, for the first time, they sensed a future built not on fear but on respect. One of the junior staff members, who had often been scolded by Collins for small mistakes, whispered to a colleague, "Maybe now things will be different," and, indeed, they would be. When security finally arrived to escort Collins out, the entire branch fell into silence. He gathered his belongings slowly, his hands heavy, his steps hesitant. No one mocked him, no one cheered. Instead, they watched quietly, each person reflecting on what had unfolded. As Collins walked past the rows of desks, he avoided eye contact. The pride that once carried him was gone. The silence that followed him out the door was not victory for anyone else. It was simply the closing of a chapter. Far from the branch, Marissa paused at a small cafe. She ordered tea and sat by the window, watching people pass by. She reflected on the day, not with triumph, but with gratitude. She believed every action had meaning, every choice revealed truth, and today had shown once again that dignity was stronger than ridicule. The sunlight spilled across her table, warming the pages of a small notebook she carried. She opened it and wrote a single line. Power built on arrogance will fall, but respect built on truth will stand. She closed the notebook with a soft smile. The world outside rushed on, but Marissa felt at peace. She had not only closed a chapter in the life of a manager, but also planted a seed of change in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the moment. The triumph was not loud, not boastful. It was quiet, steady, and lasting. And as the day moved forward, the memory of her calm strength remained inside the walls of the bank, reminding everyone that true leadership was never measured by appearance, but by character.